me to pay the tuition for 3.5 years. Okay, if he had thought like this and he wanted to become a web creator, he should have told me and dropped up from the university much earlier. Yeah, but when he decided to go to web school, this is a vocational school, I listened to him, and he sounded very serious for the first time in his life. So I didn't stop it. I was angry because he did not tell me that he had different mind. Well, I mean, if he came to me before going to university that he wanted to go to a vocational school, I would have said, yeah, that would be a great idea. If he has his own idea of what he wants to do, I would support it. But he wanted to go to this university, major in chemistry, and do this one. That was his choice.
Yes.
That's why I supported it.
Yes.
Then I kept supporting it, and then he had changed his mind and going this way, and that's why I said, you know, I didn't like that, because if he had told me earlier, that, you know, we could have avoided at least 2 years worth of tuition.
Well,
That's why when he graduated from vocational school, he was already very good. That's why he was able to establish his company. Now he is chief executive of a company of his own, about 50 people I employed. And I didn't even know he wanted to do this, but you know, that's his own choice. So now he is learning a great deal about management, about IT, about everything. So he is basically very interested in learning more about management or managing a company well. And that's what I say, you know, his score in the school was not very good all the way through, but he is polishing his capability as time goes on. At one point in your life, you are tested on the academic score, and then if you achieve very well, then that means you're very well. That's not true from my experience, because some people may say, may sort of flourish later in the stage of life, or some people who are not very good in mathematics could be very good in art and other forms. Therefore, for the school system to have a set test, you know, of different subjects, maybe 4 or 5 subjects, and measure these things at one point in life and say, you're very good. In other words, you're rating the person whose total value is the lifetime value. Yet you are sort of measuring that one at one point in your life. And then those who score very well may feel that they're very well. Therefore, they stop making more efforts. And they will sit, or they will assume that they will sit at the top of the society, which is totally wrong. That's why we have so many idiot leaders. These are the leaders today in politics and in bureaucracy, but the only reason why they are there is because they scored very well at one point in their life. Sometimes you have to work together, and by repeating this kind of give and take session for a long time, a person may exhibit certain talents. It's not test, but by working together or letting them try for a certain period of time. And that's why this test lacks a very fundamental understanding that the person's value. The second son was much more difficult. He is very sensitive, very much like me, blood type B, and you know, a little bit of tendency to be an artist. And I'm a musician. He is a computer games man. He started his computer technology lessons. You know, he started taking lessons in computer programming when he was like 12 years, and then he became very good, very rapidly. And this meant that he was not interested in covering the wide range of subjects. He wanted to concentrate on computer. And it was very difficult. In the school, I was called by middle school when he was 14 years of age and said that this kid is not going to be able to graduate from the middle school. And when he was in the kindergarten, says 2 plus 2 is 4. And then he says, what about 2 minus 2? And I said, wait a little bit more. You know, like you go to grammar school. And he says, could it be 0? So I said, well, that's right. How about 3 minus 2? So I said, well, what do you think? He says, 1. Then he says, well, how about 2 minus 3? I said, wait until you become like, 10 years old. He says, could it be minus 1? And then this guy always asks questions like this. And then he says, okay, how about then 30 minus 20? So I said, wait, and then he said, could it be minus 10? So I said, that's right. This guy is very persistent. How about 200 minus 300? Then I say, what do you think? He says, minus 100. So I showed him like and then he says, how about 25,565 minus 37,355? I said, I don't know. Then he disappears in his room, and a couple hours later, he comes out and says, is this correct?
Answer?
Yeah, and then that's the correct answer. So it's a very, very sort of amazing kind of structure. In a struggling way, he wants to find his own answer.
Right.
Yeah. But it's the same day as he discovered 3 minus 2 is 1, but 2 minus 3 is minus 1. Same day, he goes to 5-digit. That's the kind of mentality he has. So he doesn't need any education. He needs a very good instructor. This kid was so sensitive that if you push him to a corner, he might commit suicide. That type of character. Because he is a deep thinker. A very good trait. But he has a tendency not to compromise. He has a tendency to stick to his own beliefs. And therefore, convincing him doesn't really make sense. And if you push him, whereas he still doesn't like to do so, then I was afraid that he might actually commit suicide. And therefore, I had a very difficult time because school called me and said that, look, with this kind of score, your son is not going to be able to go to high school. And I looked at these tests, math tests, and then of the 20 questions, he answers only 20%. 4 questions. They were all right. And then he writes there, the rest is the same. Then he comes out of the school, classroom, and so I asked him, how did you do? He says, very well. And I looked at this, because teacher showed me this one.
The paper,
Yeah, and this is, at least the ones that he answered are correct. And then he is absolutely right. The other 16 were exactly the same. I showed him this one to him and said, in the classroom, when there's a test, you have to finish it. He says, that's not education.
Wow.
That's training.
Wow.
And I don't go to school for training. If you spend enough time with children, you will understand what they are up to, what they like to do, why they don't like to do the homework, why they don't want to go to school, and you will understand that the children has a problem a mismatch with the current. In particular case, I did two things. One is for us to plan an annual program.
Yeah.
I schedule everything 1 year ahead so that I have very concentrated time with my children. So we go out of the city, someplace in the mountain or the sea or even overseas, and spend maybe 1 to 2 weeks together. So it's a more concentrated time. This way I can show them how things are outside of the hustle bustle of Tokyo. Secondly, I spend a lot of time talking with my wife so that she and I will say the same thing. Children are very confused. If father says one thing, mother says something else. This would be a problem. I spend a lot of time for breakfast, etc. I'm a busy person, but not busy enough to skip these things, so that the value that we communicate to children are exactly the same. Therefore, kids cannot negotiate with either side. I have advised very strongly in the book to turn off the television so that the family can engage in conversation. And this conversation could be anything. Or planning for the next vacation. So they are much more cosmopolitan in this sense. They are much more sort of sensitive to the notion of learning language. They are usually very good in English, and some of them are also very good in Japanese. So at least they are trilingual in this. And that's a huge advantage. And when you learn other countries' language, your mind broadens. And then in addition, they have a much stronger family tie. Compared with Korea, I've been to Taiwan 200 times, Korea 200. Taiwan still holds this family tie. Most businesses go from father to son, sometimes to daughter, etc. I'm sometimes very surprised when CEO introduces their children to me. And then when I take my children to Taiwan, my sons to Taiwan media pays attention to, oh, my son is now among the audience. It's amazing, you know. I have never seen any other country paying more attention, but they are more sort of inheritance conscious society. This is good and bad, because this means that father tends to dictate more on what the children ought to be.
Yes.
Because they like to see their children to be the inheriting heir apparent. And that may be restraining, because children has their own future. They may not want to inherit the family business. And then they can go to Japan or US or other countries to learn more about the business. So I think the Taiwan children are much more conscious to become a global leader. School, at least in Japan, was created to catch up with the West. In other words, you know, after the Meiji Restoration, we had to catch up with the West. We were the sort of very, very few countries in the rest of the world, other than the Western countries, to be industrialized. And in order to do this in a very efficient way, we had the answer. And those who would sort of become the leader of the country would learn the answer, implement it for the second time, not the first time in the world, but for the second time. And therefore, that kind of teaching may be good in a catch-up society. The whole society is in a catch-up mode, right? But in Japan today, which is caught up with the West, we now have to sort of look into a new sort of style of the country. We don't know where we're going, but certainly what we need is a leadership. What we need is an innovative people. What we need is a risk taker. And that is a very different kind of profile of people that we need in the society. Parents who would encourage children, their own kids, to do something different, different from what teachers say. And therefore, I think in today's world, unless parents take the initiative, this change in children will never take place. More important, because our country will never change this. And therefore, parents have a very important role. But unfortunately today, this is not taking place. That's why I wrote the book. And the only reason I say is, well, this is what I do. Okay, and I'm not saying that this is the right thing. This is what I do because I'm concerned about the Japanese system. And the only way to do this is to start with my own family.
With family.